The showdown on Jones Street continues. Still no state budget, still no agreement on things like teacher pay, new regulations for coal ash, funding for ECU School of Medicine, film incentives, and, of course, the big one, Medicaid. Here to talk about that, the man that knows it all, the man that can tell us what's going on, Tom Campbell, the host of NC Spin. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Henry. How are you?
Happy summer to you. How you doing? I was watching the show on Sunday, and you had, as always, a good group up there talking about what's happening. But you know what? There hasn't been an offer from either the Senate or the House to either party since last week, a week ago today. The House is not even scheduled to be in session until Thursday. There's a bill saying they're going to end the session on Friday. What the heck is going on?
Nothing.
It doesn't seem like it, does it? And, here's the thing. I don't know about you, but all my sources have gone cold. Nobody will talk to me right now. I said something's about to happen.
The reason for that, though, is that nothing's happening. The House was getting ready to make a counter proposal yesterday, but my understanding is they pulled back on it. Henry, there's just a tremendous difference between the House and the Senate and the governor on several of these issues, the teacher pay being one of them, and how to fund it. The Senate is just absolutely adamant about the fact that we're going to get rid of teacher assistants. The House saying, no, we're not going to do that, so let's have a more modest pay and keep our teacher assistants. Then the Medicaid situation is just really, really radically different. The Senate wants to pull Medicaid out from under the Department of Health and Human Services and create a new state agency. The governor indicated, or the House indicated yesterday, that might be unconstitutional. I doubt that it is. The legislature can create state agencies anytime they want to. But the House just doesn't buy that. They also don't like the idea of kicking out or removing from eligibility a lot of aged, blind, disabled, and elderly citizens who are qualifying currently for Medicaid. So you've got the differences between these two. You've got the coal ash differences. You've got film incentive differences. There is just a tremendous gap, a chasm between these two. If it was just, typically what we have in situations like this is we'll have a situation where there's one or two issues that they need to resolve before they can wrap things up and go home. But there's just so many going on right now. Obviously, some are larger than others. But the teacher pay, the coal ash, the Medicaid, these are pretty big differences. And so far, nobody has come up with a solution. Of course, the big problem with all of this is Tom Tillis has got to get out of here and has got to get on the campaign trail. The polls are showing that Kay Hagan has taken about a 6-point lead in the U.S. Senate race. And Tillis must have those teacher pay increases in order to be able to get out on the campaign trail because he's promised them to the teachers. And there was an interesting article in the Insider this morning that said that, or actually it was a column from Gary Pierce, that in 64 counties in North Carolina, public school employees, i.e. teachers, are the largest single employer. The schools are the largest single employer in those counties, in 64 counties. These folks are going to go vote in November. Tillis has got to have some votes.
One other issue I didn't mention also is this question about what they're going to do, if anything, about insurance coverage for autism patients, all these children with autism that are having to put out all this huge amount of money to get insurance coverage or to get services for their children to help them if they've got autism. We've been covering that pretty extensively. One of the leading proponents of that in the state, Tom, is one of the members of Jeff Lebo's basketball coaching staff down here, a young man by the name of Kyle Robinson, who's head of the director of East Carolina's basketball operations, and he's got an autistic son, and he's been working really hard with the folks in Raleigh to try to make that case. And it seems like they've made the case to the House and the governor. But once again, it's the Senate leadership that won't even hear the bill. And so, you start to wonder what's really going on here, because the term irrational comes to mind, and I've heard that being used about some of these things, particularly when it comes to the teacher pay issue, digging in on 11%, which, the real issue is not that they want to give teachers 11%. It's just that they want to cut the teaching assistants, and this they think is a good trade-off. At least that's what it appears to me. So what do you think? I mean, there's a lot of finger pointing going on now. The article yesterday, the News Observer, about the tension between Berger and Tillis and McCrory. I mean, that seems real to me.
There are some who would like to say that the liberal media is making all of this up because they just want to rub the Republicans' noses in the fact that they're not making decisions, and that in reality the conflicts are no worse than they ever were when the Democrats were running. And in fact, if you saw last week's show, Howard Lee essentially said the same thing. Former Senator Howard Lee essentially said that he didn't think that the animus and the problems between the House and the Senate were much worse than what they typically are. We were just seeing them up front and personal because they were conducting a lot of their conference negotiations in public. But I think there really is some animus going on between the Senate and the governor. I don't think there's a lot of love lost between the Senate and Tom Tillis in the House, although if you talk privately with these senators, they are adamant about the fact they want to see Tillis prevail over Kay Hagan in the U.S. Senate race. Now, they say that, but then it appears, from my perspective, that they're trying to make things just as difficult for him in his campaign as they possibly can.
It sure does look that. It sure does look that way, doesn't it?
I don't understand. I said in a column not long ago that everybody thought when the Republicans took over, particularly when they gained the governor's office, that everything was going to be sweet tea and cookies here in Raleigh. But it's been anything but that. There is an element of the Republican Party that is very, very conservative, and a lot of that is being found in the Senate. Now, our good friend Doug Raymond, who is very close to and is very good friends with members of the Senate, tends to side with them quite a bit. But Phil Berger is one of the more interesting characters we've seen in state government in a long time. He reminds you a little bit of Jesse Helms in that he can be very gentlemanly, very courteous, very polite, very easy to talk with, and so forth like that. But, boy, he can just dig his feet in and philosophically and politically can be very, very staunch so far as his positions are concerned. And then he's got Tom Apodaca and Bob Rucho sort of as his lieutenants over there, kind of similar to what Mark Bassnight used to have with Tony Rand. And, they get very, very dug in on their political position. And interestingly enough, they really believe they're right.
The good cop, bad cop term comes to mind.
Yes,
there's a little bit of that going on.
They honestly think they're correct in their positions. I mean, this is not a case where they're just trying to be, hard to get along with or argumentative. They really believe they're right.
But you have these issues with the some of these things, like some of the funding for East Carolina med school that we're so frustrated about. It's not tax money. It's not state tax money. You're not, the med school's not asking for additional funding. It'd be nice. No. But it's a SODCA Act, this Set-Off Debt Collection Act, and UPL and Medicaid payments. That's federal money, and the SODCA thing, of course, is just debt collection from people.
Well, you need to understand one thing about this hospital situation. The Senate doesn't like hospitals. They particularly don't like the North Carolina Hospital Association and its leadership, and they really have a vendetta against hospitals. And so some of what's going on here is that EC Med School is being whipsawed a little bit by the problems that they're having with hospitals.
Yeah, I think that's true. The strange thing about that, though, is that we keep hearing that some of the hospitals and the hospital association is, not really in favor of the med schools being able to collect. Although I also get told that that's not true. I know that Duke Hospital has been complaining that the med schools should not have these debt collection tools available to them if the other hospitals aren't going to have them and that kind of thing. But I mean, here's the thing on the debt collection issue. Just about every other state agency can use that SODCA Act, and the med schools could use it up until last year. And I don't really understand. I mean, the med school's part of the state system, so there's politics there, and there's some things that we probably don't even know, to be honest with you, that have kept that from going through. But I mean, in some cases, the folks in the Senate, it's like the autism bill. The governor and the House are overwhelmingly in support of the autism bill. They're overwhelmingly in support of allowing the med schools to have that funding back, but then you get to the Senate, and the Senate won't even hear it.
Well, I think that's part of the problem. It's kind of like with my daughter when she was of dating age. If she ever brought a boy home that we liked, we never saw him again. Well, the same thing is kind of true with Tillis and McCrory. If there's a bill that they like, then it obviously is just not going to like it.
Which is really strange. I mean, I just don't understand that, but it does seem to be that way. Speaking of Phil Berger, I heard you guys talking this weekend. We talked about this some last week. You guys sounded as shocked as we were when Phil Berger Jr. lost his congressional runoff over in Greensboro last week. That was a political shocker in North Carolina, was it not? I mean,
it was.
Phil Berger Jr. had a lot of money and spent a lot of money in that campaign. What happened there? I think two things happened. Number one, the independent expenditure groups, a lot of the support groups that were advocating for Berger, ran really, really nasty ads. And I think there was some feedback, some pushback to that. But the other thing is the two sheriffs involved in that district, Rockingham and Guilford County. Not Rockingham, the sheriff in the county where Rockingham is located, up in that area. Both of them endorsed Mark Walker. Now, I think that one thing that has to be said by this is never underestimate the power of a local sheriff. Yep.
He is the highest-ranking elected official in every county and has a tremendous amount of political influence. So when that sheriff endorses, you better watch how that's going to turn out. But did you see the story that Doug Clark ran in the Greensboro News and Record about Bob Hunter, who's running for a Supreme Court seat? And Hunter came out last week and he said, if any support group, whether they favor me or don't, comes out and says anything about my opponent, Jimmy Urban, and the two of them are fairly close friends, but if he comes out, either any of them come out and say anything publicly that's negative about him, I'm going to respond to it. Is it possible, Henry, that we've seen a turning in campaigning where the voters are fed up with all of this negative advertising?
No.
Well,
you know what I think?
We saw
I
it
think
with
they
Robin
get.
Hudson.
I think they
We saw
get.
it with
I think
Robin
they get.
Hudson.
I think the voters get fed up with it, but I think that it influences them still, because
Well, we
people
saw it with
just
Robin
don't.
Hudson.
Yeah. They just don't pay. People just don't pay enough attention to know the real issues in a lot of cases, and I shouldn't say people. A lot of people. A lot of voters really don't. They really don't educate themselves on the issues, and so they allow themselves to be swayed by 30-second commercials.
Well, that's unfortunate, even though both of us benefit from running those 30-second commercials.
Oh, yeah, I'm not complaining about it. I'm just making a statement.
It's called the Broadcasters Full Employment Act of 2014.
We got a couple more minutes left. Let me ask you about the flap the governor's dealing with over the poet. I mean, that just seems to be so ridiculous to me. And now,
Henry, this is a case where the governor's staff let him down badly.
Really?
Yes. When you have an appointment of that nature to make, it's up to your chief of staff. It's up to your staff to find out everything that, I mean, how difficult would it have been for the governor's staff to have called Cultural Resources and said, hey, we got to appoint a poet laureate from North Carolina. What can you tell us about it? Mm-hmm. Or for God's sake, worst comes to worst, call Bev Perdue up or Jim Martin.
That ain't going to happen.
Or, well, anybody. I mean, and just say, okay, how do you go about appointing a poet laureate? You know, what's involved?
You know, I got a little different. I hear you. I got a little different take on it. I mean, would it really have mattered if the News Observer hadn't jumped on it and made such a big deal out of it? I mean, we're talking about, the job of poet laureate really is to write poetry.
It wasn't just the News Observer, Henry. It wasn't just the News Observer.
Oh, I know. It was the North Carolina Arts Council that started it, and then the
North Carolina Arts Council typically has had a large voice in this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, I mean, if somebody had asked, they would have found out that the Arts Council usually makes some recommendations and the governor then considers them.
Yeah.
But I think that, I mean, for instance, the other part of it is the governor's just appointed a Superior Court judge who has been reprimanded by the Bar Association.
Yeah, I saw that this morning, right, yeah.
Now, I mean, somewhere down the line, the staff just is not doing the job.
So you think the problem is in the governor's staff somewhere? They're not doing enough due diligence on some of the appointments. Okay.
Yes, and it's making the sad part about it is it's making the governor look like he's inept.
Right. Yeah, I hear you.
I mean, how can he possibly know all of these various appointments that have got to be made? I mean, you always have someone on your staff that's in charge of appointments.
Mm-hmm.
And that someone should be doing the due diligence and vetting so that it doesn't make the boss look bad. I mean, if I were Pat McCrory, I'd be firing somebody.
Hey, last question for you. Back to the budget, can you envision a scenario where they would do what both sides have threatened to do, which is just leave the current budget in place and walk away from Raleigh right now?
They can't do it.
I've heard rumors this week that there's discussion about it.
Sure. That's nothing but a bluff.
That's positioning?
Yes, they can't do that. They've got to give teachers a pay raise. Now, they may not do anything but that, but there has got to be a pay raise at the end of this session. Every single one of those 170 people are running for election.
Yeah.
Except the ones that have chosen not to run again. But, I mean, like I say, the teachers and the school employees make up the largest number of employees in a lot of counties. They got to pass a pay raise.
Yeah, it wouldn't be Moral Monday. It would be Moral Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, wouldn't it?
It would be Bloody Tuesday is what it is. Bloody Tuesday, November 7th or whatever it is.
Yeah. All right, Tom. Thank you much.